Hey everybody, it's Matthias here with the Little Mo Club. I'm here with Sally Cook. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Sally. It's a great pleasure to be able to talk to you about Maureen Connolly Brinker. And this week we celebrate the 70th anniversary of her winning the Grand Slam of tennis, which is obviously the four major titles in the same calendar season. And I cannot think of a better person to celebrate that with and to be able to talk to about than you. So could you tell us a little bit about Maureen and why you chose to write a book about her?
Well, it's a great story of how this whole collaboration or biography came about. Uh, about 5 years ago, I met Maureen's younger daughter, Brenda, in New York. She was here with my cousin. And during the dinner that we had, there was some mention. I didn't know who, I never met Brenda before, and I didn't know anything about her mom. And there was some discussion about that her mom had been a tennis player of note. And I heard her name and I didn't recognize it. Like a lot of people, I didn't recognize her name. And so I decided to do a little sleuth work and look her up. And when I looked her up and her accomplishments at such a young age, I was truly blown away and humbled. And then I read more about her short career and some of the challenges that she faced in her life. And I just knew at that point that I had to do this book. So that's how it all came about.
Well, that's great. Could you tell us a little bit about how Maureen was as like, in the early stages of her career as a little girl starting to play tennis? What was she like?
You know, I have this fabulous portrait in back of me. Can you see this portrait of Maureen?
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay. So that was done by her aunt when she was 4 or 5, and she actually has a doll in her hand. But as Maureen says in her autobiography, she didn't ever really like dolls, and her mother was had wanted to be a concert pianist, and she was raised by a single mom, actually, and she really wanted she didn't attain her dreams, so she wanted Maureen to live the life that she wanted, that she failed to live. So she gave her piano lessons, she gave her dance lessons. And Maureen really didn't like any of it too much. What she liked and what made her excited was to go out in the neighborhood of North Park, which is a sort of a working was at the time a working class neighborhood in San Diego, and play baseball with the boys. Well, at age 9, the boys decided they didn't want her on the team anymore. And so one day they kicked her off the team and they told her, go find something else to do. And she was really upset. And she was walking down an alleyway that was right across the street from her. There were some 3 cracked tennis courts. And she started to cry. She thought, what am I going to do? This is what I love to do. And a very gentle man named Wilbur Folsom, who was the tennis pro at the 3 cracked courts and was a tennis teacher, saw her and said, little girl, what's the matter? She said, I just got kicked off the boys' teams. He said, well, would you like to pick up some balls for me? My ball boy just quit, and I wondered if you'd pick up some balls for me. And in turn, I'd give you a couple of lessons. A couple of days before, she had seen a pretty spirited match with some good San Diego players at those courts. So she realized she liked tennis. So she picked up the balls for him, and then afterwards he gave her a lesson, and she absolutely loved this lesson. And so he said, well, come back tomorrow and we'll do the same thing. But instead of arriving in the afternoon, she got there at 7 o'clock in the morning and she was ready to go and she was waiting for him. And it went on like this day after day, and they developed this incredible bond. And he really took her under his wing and introduced her to something that she loved.
So, in the beginning, when Maureen first started playing, was she a lefty? I'm pretty sure I'd read somewhere that she started playing tennis as a lefty, but then coaches influenced her to try to switch to being right-handed. Is that
That's a
correct?
great question. And the switching really came from her. So she found out, I guess, Wilbur Folsom, her first coach, had mentioned that lefties really didn't do that well at that time, or it was sort of a, not a pox, but it wasn't considered good to be a lefty in tennis. So she said, I want to play tournament tennis, so I'm going to change my handedness and I'm going to be a right-handed player. And she worked and worked and worked. And she eventually, succeeded mightily. And her next coach also really helped her with that right-handedness.
So going more on her coaches, you were telling me about her first coach and now switching to a second coach, about changing handedness and all that. How were those experiences with all the different coaches that Maureen had? We know that Maureen was very grateful with the coaches and mentors she had, but what were the lessons that really made a difference to her?
Another great question, great set of questions. Okay, so Wilbur Folsom, and I'm really start the book with Wilbur because if he hadn't stopped this little girl who was crying, there might not be Maureen Connolly, Little Mo, tennis player. Um, he was a kind-hearted man who actually had suffered an accident when he was a senior in high school. He was walking across the street, a car hit him and he lost his leg. And he wasn't even sure he was going to walk, let alone become a tennis instructor. But tennis became his passion, and he realized that he could instruct, and he had a prosthetic device. And so he felt that tennis was a calling for him. He felt that everyone should learn the game, and so he was really enthusiastic, and he was a very gentle man, and he loved teaching people the game of tennis, and his pupils, he was beloved. Um, so he was a wonderful first coach for her, and she got to the point where she was, when she was 10 years old, she said, I'm going to be the number one tennis player in the world. And she would give it her all. Not only would she work with him, but she would go home from the courts and she would hit a ball against a garage door until it got dark out. And her mother called her and said, you have to come in now and go to bed. She just had this drive and determination. And, she said she was going to be the number one tennis player in the world at 10. And 7 years later, she was. So he really felt that he had taught her all that he could, and she wanted to go further. So she started working with Eleanor, uh, whose nickname was Teach Tennant, up in Los Angeles. And Teach had a very different style. She was very hard edged. She had coached Alice Marble and Bobby Riggs and Pauline Betts. And she wanted Maureen to win and succeed. And she was sort of a substitute mother figure in a sense. And there was a lot of psychological, you know, angst, I would say, in their relationship. And she felt that Maureen could not beat her opponents unless she hated them. So she taught her to hate her opponents. Um, and Maureen had a she called a press conference at her first Wimbledon and dismissed Teach as they had an argument. And here she was, this is in 1952. So she was all of 17 years old and she dismissed her coach. She knew that she had to get past her, and she ended up, winning and doing very, very well. And then she got coach who said, you don't have to hate your opponent to win. In fact, it's not a good idea. And she relearned how to play with not that hatred that she had gotten from Teach. I'm not saying that Teach wasn't a good coach. She really was, but she had this side to her that was very difficult for Maureen to deal with. And so she ended up working with an Australian coach named Harry Hopman and his wife Nell, and they had a very different approach. And then the next year she won the Grand Slam.
So as we're mentioning now, Maureen is winning Grand Slams super early. 16 years old, she won her first U.S. Open, and by the time she was only 19, she already had to retire after winning the Grand Slam, having doubles titles, mixed doubles titles. She had everything. So what can you tell us about her personality and how she was as more like transitioning into an adult, getting away from tennis?
Okay, so you're right. By the time she was 19, she'd done it all. She was the youngest at the time player to win the U.S. Open. She was the second youngest to win Wimbledon. She won a Grand Slam. San Diego had a ticker tape parade for her in 1952, where thousands of people lined up along Broadway and honored her. And she was given, and I don't know if you can see this. Can you see this portrait of the horse?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that was done by her aunt again, who was a noted artist at the time. This horse was named Colonel Maryboy, and he was given to Maureen by the city of San Diego in 1952. She absolutely loved horseback riding. Her mom was from Montana and was a horsewoman, so she loved horse riding. So, when she wasn't playing tennis, she was riding horses and she was dancing with her friends, and, she was a normal teen. So, after her third Wimbledon win, it was July 20th, 1954. It was like 2 or 3 weeks after her third Wimbledon win. She went out on a horseback ride, riding Colonel Maryboy with two friends. And uh, at the time they were in Mission Valley, and that part of San Diego was getting developed, and there were some trucks and that kind of thing, and there was a concrete truck coming toward them, and it spooked Colonel Maryboy, her horse, and he whirred around, and her leg got caught between the cement truck and the horse, and it was a very, very serious wound, and she almost lost her leg. So that ended her career, and she tried so hard to make a comeback. She lifted marbles with her toes. She did everything to keep playing, but she was in too much pain when she played, so she had to transition. Um, and it was really, really difficult for her, as you can imagine. I mean, here she was only 19 when this happened. Um, but she had a great deal of grace and the same determination that she used to win her matches. She was determined to make a new life for herself. She got married a year after the accident. She had two daughters, and she taught tennis, and she was a wonderful writer. She wrote articles for the San Diego Union Tribune. She was also a correspondent. She was a correspondent at Wimbledon. Um, and when she was playing in the 1950s, it was a very conservative era for women. And so Billie Jean King uh, told me that she actually felt that Maureen paved the way for her and other women tennis players.
Wow. So yeah, Maureen, after her career ended, she was still making a huge impact in the tennis world and outside, as you mentioned. So in 1968, she co-founded the Maureen Connolly Brinker Tennis Foundation.
That's absolutely correct. And are you a player for the
I
Little
was.
Mo?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Oh gosh, that's fantastic. What years?
So I started my first Little Mo, I think was 2014, and then I played basically every year up until 2019. I played the ones here in Florida. They're very close to my house, so I would always go every year. And sometimes I went to California a couple of times and Texas, and I did the circuit a couple of times.
Well, that is fantastic, and I'm sure you would loved it.
Yeah, no, it was honestly a great tournament. I always had a blast and I really enjoyed it. My older brother also went, so it would become like a family thing, going to Little Mo every December to the internationals here in Florida. So, yeah, great memories at the Little Mo's.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I think what she, uh, you know, uh, this is such an important part of her legacy to have this, because she felt that, so many people helped her along the way. She came from um, a family that didn't have a lot of monetary means, and so she was helped along the way by different groups. And I think she really wanted to give back. And I think it's been wildly successful. I'm sure you've met her daughters, Cindy and Brenda, through the
Yes,
tournament.
yes, yes.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So going back to Maureen, obviously having these hard times, going through the injury and having to retire so early, what would you say would be her key like personality or like her character traits? Like how would you describe her as a person?
Yeah, I mean, I think that those same traits that she had as a little girl, which, I've talked to Wilbur Folsom's son has been very helpful to me in this biography, and he said that she was a standout as a young person because she had such grit, determination, and drive. I mean, a lot of the other girls were good, as maybe as good as Maureen, but they didn't practice as hard and they weren't as determined with the drive. And I think off the court, she was a really friendly, affable, lovely person. But when she was on the court, she had such an incredible focus. She once said that if you could blast dynamite on the court next door, and she wouldn't even hear it. So her focus was incredible. And, a lot of people have described her as very down to earth, very grounded. Um, and she knew she wanted this career from the time, as I said before, she was 10. So, um, and I think as a woman, um, as a mother, she was a beloved mother. She loved being a mother. She loved writing. Writing was something that she was passionate about, and that is also draws me to her. She from a young age she had that job at the San Diego Union Tribune. She wrote an autobiography, and she was a wonderful correspondent for tennis.
And so touching a little bit on what you just mentioned about her being really focused on the court and being really friendly off of it. We know that in Wimbledon of 1952, she defeated Louise Bro. And,
Brough,
yeah,
brough,
and oh,
yeah.
bro. Okay, and she was her doubles partner at the time, correct?
Yes,
And
and
then the same thing happened the year after in Australia, right? With Julia
Doris
Sampson.
Farm, or oh yes, exactly,
Yeah.
right, right. Um, yeah, I think she compartmentalized her life so that she could say, and I think it softened somewhat after she worked with Teach, as I said, who taught her to hate her opponents. I mean, Teach did devious things, like with Doris Hart, when they were in the semifinals of Wimbledon, she told Maureen that Doris Hart said she was a spoiled brat. So she got Maureen fired up to, not like her opponent. Um, so I feel like she could, she did soften her approach to her opponents, and it wasn't any uh, detriment in terms of having her win because she was still winning. Okay, it's just the attitude changed,
Right.
um, and I think that she was very friendly with her opponents off the court, but not when she was on the court. She wanted to
Not
win.
So how were those rivalries with Doris Hart and Shirley Fry? Like she had some pretty tough matches, right? She had a rivalry going on there.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, again, I mean, it was like she, well, when she was working with Teach, as I said, Teach did devious things to get her to really dislike these people.
Hmm.
But as she moved on, she realized she could win without this dislike. So I think she grew, she changed, but she still was winning. And she was a perfectionist on the court.
So going back to the foundation, after she stopped playing, she started her foundation with Nancy Jeffett, and we've had the likes of Christopher Eubanks, who just played in the U.S. Open, Coco Gauff, Taylor Fritz, Tommy Paul, all these that are now stars. Um, playing, you can still see the impact that she's had 55 years, later after she started her foundation. So would you say, we already talked about how important the foundation has been for her legacy, but would you say that has been like what is most important to Maureen's legacy?
That's such a good question and such a thought-provoking one. Uh, you know, everything I know about the Little Mo tournament is exceptional and, really cutting edge. But there's so many facets to her life because, she was the youngest. Her youth was, extraordinary. I mean, they're talking about Coco Gauff being in the semis at the Open now and how young she is. But she's 19, and by 19, and not to uh, put Coco down in any way, shape, or form, but just to show you how young Maureen was. By 19, Maureen had won 9 Grand Slams.
Right.
Um, so I feel like that's a part, the youth. The other part that I'm really trying to address in the book is the personal tragedies that she had and how she faced them. And I think that that's just as important in terms of her legacy is the grace that she faced these challenges. And so I think they're all very important parts. I don't know if one's more important than the other.
Well, thank you so much, Sally, for taking the time to talk to us today. Um, I really appreciate it. It's been really fun time. But one last question: when does your book come out?
Well, that's a great question. I have to finish it. So I'm on a tear to finish it. And I'm really hoping that it comes out next year because that will be the 90th birthday anniversary of Maureen Connolly. So that's my hope that it comes out next year.
Well, I can't wait to read it, and I'm sure many people watching us right now are very anxious to read it as well. And who knows, we might be able to see you at the book signing.
Well, that sure would be a lot of fun. And I'd love to see you sometime in New York City.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be great. Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to having another chat soon. Look forward
I
to it.
would, I would just so enjoy that. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. And lots of good luck to you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.